Now we will head into our panel discussion entitled Next Steps to a Resilient, Healthy, Innovative Recovery. Moderating the panel is Vassilis L. Syrmos, UH Vice President for Research and Innovation, who will introduce the members of his panel. During the panel discussion, we welcome our viewers to send in questions for our panelists, which will be answered during the Q&A session to follow or at a later date on the conference website. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Syrmos. Good morning.
Good morning, Marc, and thank you for introducing me. Good morning to everybody, and welcome to the fourth and final day of our conference. This morning, we will discuss the path forward for Hawaii with 5 leaders of our community that represent a large sector of our economy. First and foremost, I would like to introduce Bob Harrison. He is the President and CEO of the First Hawaiian Bank. John DeFries, who is the President and CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority. Admiral Aquilino, who is the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Paul Yokota, the president of FCH Enterprises. It's a family of businesses, including Zippy's and Napoleon Bakery. And last but not least, Dr. Lassner, who is the president of UH System. And from what I understand, this month is David is actually celebrating 40 years as a proud member of the University of Hawaii. So with that, welcome to the panel. And Bob, I would like to start with you and actually pick up from one of the last comments or the last points that Enrico made in the previous talk, and actually have you give us your thoughts about the short run and long run opportunities and challenges that you see for our state and our economy during the pandemic and after the pandemic. So back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Vassilis, and honor to be here. And David, congratulations. We have a big celebration for our 40-year employees. I hope Vassilis is going to do that for you later. No, just a few comments. So we talked about short-term and long-term, and the short-term is, bankers deal in reality. And the reality is we have high unemployment. We're down 120,000 jobs, and we need to get those people back to work. That's the #1 priority. And we have to do it in jobs that have no ramp up, no training, no anything, little process. We need to get people back to work now. And John will talk about this later. The #1 option on the table is tourism. We're really good at that. And I think sometimes, we take it for granted, but we're excellent at it. And we have a safe place to come with good hospital capacity, and we manage the COVID pandemic compared to others exceptionally well. So I'll leave that for John to speak of later. The second and the obvious one, and the Hawaii tried and true, is construction. And we tend to think of construction as saying, well, that's kind of, it's big value add and we need housing and infrastructure, but what's the innovation in that? And quite frankly, construction over the last several decades has gotten very innovative in their techniques and the way they've done things. So that's the old economy things to a certain extent. And now our economy is pivoted. And everything now is about data. And I missed yesterday's panel on the new digital economy. And if I rehash a little bit of that, I apologize. But and why is data so important? And it's not just for financial and insurers and that sort of thing. It really is because, excuse me, the consumer has spoken and they want a better experience and they want it cheaper or free. And as we know, free is hard and cheaper is difficult as well, but they're willing to pay for it. And what they're willing to pay for it in is data. And that's where we see so much activity now is customers give you their data, and how you inboard that, ingest that, and what you do with it has created a significant number of jobs. I think the thing that's different now, because we tend to think of these jobs in Silicon Valley or Seattle or Austin or these hubs of where that's created. Now you're seeing that really move into the broader economy. Everything is based on that. Our priority as a bank, you have to get it. You have to know what your customers are, what they want. And it starts with being able to ingest that data. What kind of jobs does that get? Does that provide? It's really your software engineers. They're creating APIs. They're making it easier to collect the data. And then what do they do when they collect the data? They put it in the cloud. Then you have to organize it. And then you go from a software engineer to a data scientist. And data scientists are very special people because not unlike what the UH lab at the bottom of Keller Hall does, you have to be able to take it and make it so people can understand it. And that's a data visualization lab, but businesses throughout every economy need to know how to capture the data, organize it, and then lastly, and this part I think is the piece that is the least talked about, and that's helping existing businesses learn how to use that. So it's great that you can capture it, it's great that you can organize it, but how do you get people to actually understand use it? The old farts like me that aren't used to doing that, we need business analysts. It's a broad term, it can mean a lot of different things. Some people look at it more of a project manager, but it really is that translator between the business and data. And that's what we're going to start seeing more and more and more of. And that's the hard part because they're having to retrain all of us existing business people into a new way of doing business, a new way of looking at things. So there's lots of work there that we need to train and educate and develop engineers, data scientists, business analysts. And that's the important part that we have going forward. And how does that turn into jobs? So today in Hawaii, that's scores of people. In the next year or two, that'll be hundreds of people. 3 to 5 years out, we're probably looking at thousands of people. What it won't be, I don't feel, in the foreseeable, back to your question, Vassilis, 5 years, we won't see tens of thousands of people in that space. We could see thousands, and that's a lot. And they're high-paying jobs, and they're very good jobs, and it's very interesting, good work. But it's hard to see where that takes us to tens of thousands of jobs. That's on doing the business we do today and doing it better, because we all have to make that pivot, or quite frankly, to Guy's talk at the top of the day today, we won't be around. If you're in the lower left, you're not going to be around very long. And that's just the reality of the world we're living in. So maybe I can stop there.
Thank you, Bob. And with actually that comment, I want to segue to John a little bit. And when we're talking about jobs, you have the tourism industry that actually has suffered the highest losses in jobs. And we do know tourism is going to be back. There's no question about it. The bigger question on everybody's head is how is it going to come back, and how is it going to look, and how are we going to deal the next 10, 20, 30 years with the tourism industry. And I think John probably is a leader in the community. He's very thoughtful. And I would like you, John, if you could share with us, how do you foresee the industry, not next month, but maybe next year or even 3, 5 years from now? And, maybe talk a little bit of everybody talks about that 10 million people number, that magical number. And a lot of people maybe have second thoughts. So how all that plays in your industry, workforce development, innovation, and ecotourism and all that good stuff.
Thank you, Vassilis. And Bob Harrison's correct. Hawaii does know how to do tourism. As you pointed out, we ended 2019 just north of 10,400,000 visitors. Visitor expenditures of 17.6 billion, and generating a transient accommodation tax of just north of 600 million. So we know how to do that, and 2019 was a banner year. It was also a banner year because the Hawaii Tourism Authority at that time was doing extensive fact-finding and listening in the various communities throughout our state. What was beginning to show signs of the growth in tourism beginning to put pressures on our infrastructure, and in different parts of the state, some pressure where overcrowding and, to coin the phrase, over-tourism was beginning to reveal itself. Much to the credit of the industry, it embarked On that process of engaging the community, it resulted in January 2020 with the HTA board approving a new strategic plan for the next 5 years that puts a priority on natural resources, Hawaiian culture, the community's well-being, and the way in which we present our brand as a global destination. So here we are, New Year's Eve, with a banner year, the strategic plan, January 2020, and 60 days later, the pandemic hits and the economic collapse commences. In the course of any given week or month, I speak to people who aspire to a future of 6 million visitors. I speak to people who aspire to 12 million. At the moment, those numbers aren't on my front burner, at least. I'm more concerned about what happened in the month of July when that number became 0. And that kind of expansive collapse begins to put a tremendous threat on the health and well-being of our local families. And so we have 2 objectives. One is to get this industry on a sustainable relaunch trajectory. When the governor announced that October 15th, we would resume trans-Pacific travel, at that time, I realized that, and I characterized that proclamation by saying, you know, the perfect scenario would be a fully vaccinated world and a fully vaccinated Hawaii. And so anything short of that appears and feels to be imperfect. And, but the idea of waiting for a fully vaccinated world is not viable either. We don't have the ability to carry ourselves as a society for that extended period. So a measured and calculated risk was taken to reopen. And so far, the steps are in place. Certainly the industry has responded by establishing health guidelines that are designed to protect our local workers, the work environment, and also the visitor that's coming in. So let me put that, the present situation on the side and kind of look at where I believe we are heading. There is a term used today more often than I can recall called regenerative tourism. Regenerative tourism actually takes the time to look at 2 generations, 3 generations from now, and making a commitment, at least in a vision, to understanding that the natural resource base has to be there, has to be in good shape, has to exceed possibly where that base is today. The reason is that those generations deserve to have that base of natural resources around which they can cultivate and build their own economy and a sense of well-being. So if you establish that 2 or 3 generations out and you reverse engineer it to where we are today, the HTA has embarked upon a destination management planning process, again, establishing steering committees and community workshops on every island, and essentially inviting the community to come up with the new ideas that will develop and help us understand what a compatible model for tourism will be for each of our islands and the communities within those islands, as opposed to importing one model into an island which the community will have to live with. We've started this process that actually preceded my arrival at HTA. But knowing that that process was unfolding, when I stepped into this office September 16th of this year, it was important for me to establish a Hawaiian cultural value that I thought would serve as an organizing principle. And that cultural value is malama, to protect, to nurture, to take care of. And that mindset's important because we're living at a time when the serious public health threat is there. And as a community, we cannot just get up and meander through a pandemic. We actually have to have a mindset and be very aware of the steps we're taking, the people we're touching, the places we're going. And this Malama mindset is now established as really a guidepost for our work moving forward at the Tourism Authority. Essentially, it is something we take into the workplace where we need to Malama one another. We need to be able to Malama our families. Equally, we need to be able to Malama the visitor. And as importantly, educate the visitor on how to Malama us. So this relationship of reciprocity, upon which the cultural value of aloha is built, upon which our Kama'aina lifestyle is built, has to be integrated at a higher degree into our industry moving forward. One of my closest friends said to me, why don't we start looking at visitors as students and Hawaii as a school? And when I said, what do we teach them? He said, we'll teach them how to Malama. We'll show them examples of how we Malama ourselves, how we Malama our natural environment. And one would hope that when they go home, they will be better prepared to Malama their families and their neighborhoods and their communities. So it'll be a long recovery, but I'm confident in the industry's capacity and confident in our local communities to help facilitate what I think will be a successful and sustainable relaunch trajectory. So I'll stop there, Vassilis. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for these very encouraging words and inspirational words. And with that, I want to turn to Admiral Aquilino, who is the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. As Bob and you talked, John, Bob talked about the financial sector, construction, and you talked about tourism. At that point, we have pretty much all major economies going on the islands, except the military spending, which is probably one of the highest sector of our economy. And it is integral not only to the community, but to the university and the national security of the nation. So with that, I would like to ask the Admiral to provide some of the priorities that he sees going forward, our competition with foreign nations and how our DT&E plays into that, and also his experience here in the state of Hawaii and his collaboration and participation with our community. Admiral?
Hey, Vassilis, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'd like to thank also the distinguished panel members. I'm glad to be able to provide hopefully some positive information in a time when across the nation, including Hawaii, there's struggle in the economic sector. First, let me say that being in Hawaii, I think more importantly than ever, we're starting to see the strategic benefit and importance of Hawaii as it applies to some of the national security challenges. I do not see that going down. I only see Hawaii as becoming more important when you think about some of the adversaries in the Western Pacific. So that ought to frame the national security challenge. What are you talking about? A competition with China, concern about North Korea. We do have 1,700 miles of Russian coastline in the Western Pacific that we watch. And then violent extremism is certainly not only located, in the Middle East. So those are the challenges, and it highlights Hawaii's strategic importance. Again, I talked about the partnerships that exist. I want to thank everyone for welcoming my sailors. We are and feel a part of the community. And I think the mutual support, the benefit economically that the Navy and DoD provides, as well as the support from the community, has been consistent for years in the past, and certainly for decades to come. So what I start with is kind of framing what we're doing today with regard to partnership. And that expands across all sectors, all communities, and all industries, whether it be in construction, whether it be research and development, whether it be in partnership and education, whether it be in IT, cyber. So just to frame the DoD contribution, it has been identified the last measure we took. DoD provided about $7.2 billion towards the Hawaii economy. The best thing is that has been untouched in this pandemic. And again, across all of those industries that were discussed. And I only see that increasing. Whether it be research and development through the University of Hawaii, the newly established NROTC program at the University of Hawaii, engineers and technical experts with STEM backgrounds supporting the shipyard, which is the largest employer in Hawaii. All of those are extremely positive, will continue and will continue to grow. Now, for your information, the Navy provides about half of that. So we view ourselves, again, as I said, as a part of the community and a massive economic contributor in all of those fields, and we'll continue that. Workforce development is key. That provides, I think, opportunities for the future in many of the industries and in the expertise areas that we need to continue with. So what does that mean for the future? All of those will continue. I see increase in construction in the form of upgrades to the Pearl Harbor shipyard dry dock. We're going to work to put in a new dry dock over the next 7-8 years. That work, that money is already in the budget when passed, and that work will begin. It will start with planning, and then it will move towards construction. That's an over $1 billion project by itself in our current estimates. If you've been following the Red Hill, I appreciate the partnership with the Board of Health and the EPA to continue to maintain Red Hill in excess of all standards that exist to ensure both the strategic need for that fuel across all of the Department of Defense agencies and for the state of Hawaii for in time of emergencies. We will continue that work, and in our partnership with the University of Hawaii and other R&D companies, we are continuing to look for dual containment technologies that will allow us to continue to use those tanks in the safest, most effective way possible. Very big opportunity as we continue to execute those works. Information technology, cybersecurity, all of those opportunities exist. Now, what I will say is we are not easy to work with, and I hope that many of you out there will not be discouraged. There are many rules that are put in place by the federal government for working with the Department of Defense. In our hope, we would make those to, at some point to be more user-friendly, but I know that because of those opportunities, if all of those industry personnel or people who wish to work with DoD, A, would have some patience, and then B, if you need some help, please ask for it. Those processes are dictated to us, and they're not designed to discourage. They're designed to be auditable, fair, and with competition. So please be patient with that. Now, as you look towards new opportunities, and for us to increase that $7.2 billion number as tourism and some of the other industries begin to come back, again, I've highlighted the cybersecurity area. I think there's huge potential there as we see adversaries really doing very or significant harm through the use of a keyboard. We're going to need some help there. We're running a pilot program for a 5G experiment on what does that look like here in Hawaii. I think that's an extremely fruitful opportunity for all as we experiment. Number one, the military uses, which is the focus of our efforts. Think building readiness for ships, submarines, airplanes. Think, again, protection of our data, as was discussed before. That data is so important. It's also critical that we are able to protect the data we need. And there's also dual use purposes for 5G. And I think there's room to, experiment with those options in benefit for both military and for the community. Public-private house partnerships, as we reconstitute some of our family living areas on the construction side, commercial aviation, again, just a ton of opportunities. And as I said before, the benefit of it being transparent to the pandemic allows this to be a bridging function while the tourist industry, which I'm also very confident will come back. We want it to come back. We want our families to be able to come visit this amazing place. And we thank the community for, again, embracing us and making us a part of the community. So with that, Vassilis, I'll go ahead and stop, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Admiral. And thank you actually for the kind words about diversification and high skill paid employees with the U.S. military. With that, I actually going to turn to Paul Yokota, and I will also ask Paul to touch or elaborate a little bit more on a point that Bob did before, and the need of technology, whether it's cyber, IT, into the businesses here in Hawaii, and how some lessons, or maybe you can talk, Paul, about some lessons that you've learned the last 5 years of how technology can be integrated, even in a small business environment, and how important it is.
Thank you, Vassilis, and thank you for allowing me to be on this panel this morning. I appreciate it very much. As Vassilis mentioned, and just to clarify, I work for FCH Enterprises. FCH stands for the names of our founders, Francis and Charlie Higa. So we're a local company, born and raised, and we've been here for about 54 years. We have 22 Zippy's restaurants, Napoleon's Bakery. We have Food Solutions International, which is a production plant which serves all of our restaurants, as well as providing wholesale and retail products as well, distributed through supermarkets here and across the mainland. And we have a catering company called A Catered Experience, and we do banquets as well as outside catering. I wanted to mention that because to answer Vassilis' question, when I talk about technology, and I need to give perspective as to what happened to us with COVID-19 and how we responded, and how we're going to come out of it and what's next. So, we got hit over the head. It had a tremendous impact, COVID-19 did, to our industry. We went overnight from an industry that was high touch to no touch. We're in a game where the field is constantly changing and the rules are made up as you go. I mean, we're hearing different requirements, different needs happening every day, and we have to adjust to them constantly. So when people talk about COVID-19 being not a sprint, but a marathon, in our perspective, we think of it more as a triathlon. So you have to have, distinct capabilities, and you have to be able to respond to 3 unique tests. The first test that we ran into was improvisation. And for a small local business like us, when we ran into COVID-19, improvisation meant that we'd have to switch overnight, as I mentioned, from high touch to no touch. We had to reduce hours. We had to figure out how to reassign our staff when we shut down our dine-ins. We went into safety protocol, increasing those, and we had to adjust our production to meet these new requirements as well. The second test was to innovate, and this is where technology and our partners come in. In a very short time, in fact, for initiatives that we had intended to implement over 2 years, we had to do this in a 4-month period. And to do that and to survive, we had to make sure that we work with great partners. And we had to work with partners who develop systems and develop methodologies that could quickly move us from being simply reactive in that improvisation stage to being consistent and being reliable. And so we had to move from disorder to order. And as I said, we had to advance our technological advancement. Some of these innovations that we implemented, we had a mobile ordering app that we implemented a few months prior, but we needed to ramp up the promotion of it and educate and promote this to our customers so they would use our mobile ordering app. That became so important to us. We implemented a waitlist app so we would know when the customers who ordered arrived. We had to implement additional mobile delivery apps because people wanted to have food delivered by Uber or Bite Squad. We had to implement payment apps so guests could pay without entering our locations. We implemented safety apps. You'll see thermal scanners at our restaurants. You'll see applications that we have that we're testing for wellness applications as well, so we can know our employees are healthy and safe. And of course, throughout all this, we had to innovate with new menu items, creating bulk packages, wahana meals, essentials. At some point, we sold groceries just to be a one-stop shop for our customers. So it's that second test in our triathlon was innovation, and we did that together with our partners, and we continue to do that with our partners. The third test is to integrate, because we not only have to innovate, we have to make this part of our culture and our foundation. So we have to take everything we learned, everything we implemented, and make sure it sticks and becomes part of our standards. So for that, we developed training materials, guides, videos. We implemented new initiatives in our learning management system to educate and train our employees and our staff. We constantly have to manage and monitor, and we have to make sure through all this that we're true to ourselves. We want to make sure that we are true to our foundational philosophies and our core values. And we want to come out of this liking ourselves, right? We don't want to come out of this looking at ourselves and who did we become? We want to be true to ourselves as well. I should point out, with all these innovations, with all these new applications that we applied, we have to constantly, and this was spoken about by a couple of the other panelists, we have to be constantly aware of cybersecurity. With everything we add, we have to make sure that the software and our vendors are vetted to make sure that we're keeping a safe environment, not only health-wise, but in IT. We have to make sure that they're all PCI compliant and we maintain great control of personal information. So we've come a pretty long way. As you asked about technology, we've had to count on technology and implement it very quickly to get where we are. And we've been fortunate to survive this far. And I know your second question was, what can we expect next? What happens next? For one thing, I think we can expect that some of the things we've implemented so far are going to be long-term expectations from our guests and our customers. Enhanced safety and sanitation. We implemented so many additional features for our safety and sanitation program. We want to maintain that. It's the right thing to do. And I think our guests and customers will expect that. Our customers will expect that we continue to offer expeditious ordering online, and when they're calling in, will continue to expect things like payment online, curbside service, having mobile delivery options. We have to also remind ourselves that buying patterns are going to be different, and they're going to be different at least for the near future, perhaps for the medium future, or even the long term. day parts, our business day parts, for instance. Will we have business lunches if more people are working from home? We're going to have to learn about that. Are we going to have late night business until the entertainment venues come back? If there are no concerts, no theaters for a while, when is our late night business going to come back? We have to adjust to that as well. And unfortunately, you've seen some shrinkage in our industry. We've lost some long-term and very important, very foundational players. And I think that's disappointing, and it's not good for our industry. We need variety, we need options, we need constant new ideas and concepts. So we need to get people back into the industry. We need to keep it vital and growing. And then lastly, I think from everything we learned how to operate leaner, and we learned how to operate more intelligently. In the future for our industry, we'll know again that innovation is key, and we'll have to keep focusing on innovation throughout. We'll have to then make sure that we then integrate and take all those innovations and make it part of our foundation, make it part of our culture as well. That's what I have, Vassilis. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Actually, it is amazing because a lot of people don't understand ZPS is not about food, but it's all about high tech nowadays. So I am amazed myself, and kudos to you for being so visionary as a company to be able to put forward such solutions. And obviously you started even before the pandemic. So in that sense, you were not reacting to something, but actually adjusting to something. So thanks, Paul. This is actually pretty inspiring. And I got to say that the first thing both my kids when they come home from mainland, they go to ZPS. So there you go.
We appreciate that support. And I have to say, Vassilis, all this was a total team effort. Everybody had to buy in. Everybody had to be willing to fail and succeed together. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. With that, I want to actually turn to Dr. Lassner, who is actually has been doing a lot of thinking of how to reposition the university. It is probably one of the most aggressive and ambitious plans I've seen in my tenure of 30 years at the university. I'm not as senior as David is, but it is, as Paul said, it's not only you have to learn to be leaner, but also you have to adjust, you have to focus, you have to diversify, and you have a lot of customers. So David has done an outstanding job, and we're very fortunate to have him as a leader in our community. And with that, I wanted to pass it to him to talk a little bit about some of the very ambitious goals that he has put for the university and how he wants to reposition the university to address the needs of the community. David?
Thanks, Vassilis, and thanks to my fellow panelists for setting this up so well. I think one of the first things that became very apparent to me is that we're not looking at how to get through the next year or 2 years. We really need to look at a complete reset to come out of this pandemic and financial crisis with a game plan for what we want to be as a community and set of communities across the state. And if we don't think hard about it, as, for example, John is doing around tourism, we won't have any control of our destiny. And so for me, when I think about the role of UH, that is the most important thing that we can do as an institution. And I say that on behalf of all 10 campuses spread across the islands and our many education and research centers. Each of our parts has a different role, but collectively, I truly don't believe the state can succeed without all of UH firing on all cylinders to help. So I think of it in a couple of ways. First is, and it's come up several times, is the importance of workforce, getting people into the jobs that exist now. And we have a whole range of programs, and I know those have been mentioned, and we're incredibly grateful both for the support of the CARES funding, but also a number of philanthropists in the community. Bob has stepped up from First Hawaiian Bank and provided scholarship money. one of the most important things we know is that the jobs of the future will require some post-secondary education. And Hawaii has to get more of our public high school kids into college. And that's something that we all have to do. And that doesn't mean earning a bachelor's degree or even an associate degree, but some kind of post-secondary education or training to prepare them better for living wage jobs. In the university, we have a responsibility to help prepare people for the jobs that do require some kind of credential, high quality credential. And those have been laid out in multiple studies, in particular, healthcare, construction, education, and we can do better, particularly across the system. And that's on our radar for right now. Every time we can get a Hawaii resident into a Hawaii job, we are doing better for the individual, and we are doing better for the employer, and we are doing better for Hawaii than when we need to bring people in at the same time. As Carl Bonham has consistently reminded us, we're experiencing such severe brain drain of many of our best and brightest. We are facing an incredible budget crisis, and that's not of our doing. That is, Hawaii's dependence on tourism means that our state budget is being more severely impacted than almost any other state in the country. This morning I was on with the presidents of the Mountain West schools. Many of them have booming economies, even as they have also booming cases of COVID. But we're looking at a multi-year financial recession in state government. And UH is at this time funded about 60% of our operations are funded by the state. So that's a huge challenge. We cannot be spared from it. And I'll just say a couple things. We need within UH to prioritize not just education, which is usually what people look to first. We also have to continue to support our research enterprise. As I mentioned Monday, last year we were about a $450 million industry just with our extramural funding. That is not a small number in this state. That's other people's money that we bring in and help spend with incredible multiplier impacts and job creation across the islands. And Vassilis is always optimistic, and I check every morning, and we're well over 10% up today, year over year, as compared to last year, which was our second most successful year in our history. So we've got to be able to continue to invest state dollars in research as well as education. And that is always a challenge with some in the community and at the legislature. We need to leverage it to provide more of our undergraduates with research opportunities. This is one of the important ways, along with the programs that Carl mentioned around business plans and entrepreneurship programs. One of the best things we can do is get our undergraduate students involved in research and actually solving real world problems, developing real world solutions, both basic and applied, with our faculty, and bringing those skills out into the private sector after they graduate. And as Vassilis knows, since I remind him regularly, we have to do more to connect our research enterprise to the community and engage in providing solutions for businesses, as well as more job creation. And he's got some exciting programs underway within his office now to do that. So I'd like to say a little bit about maybe what's different here as I look at my 40 plus years in Hawaii and being around as a technologist for most of that through multiple rounds of let's get high tech started in the state. And I do think it's different this time around. A few things I'll mention as we look at economic development and diversification. One is I think there's an appreciation now that we're not just looking for one solution. So really, to the extent we were reliant on plantation agriculture, and we have made a shift over in the time I've been here, completely away from that form of agriculture, but we went to another, I'll just call it a monoculture, and that is tourism. We didn't diversify everything else. And I think now there's an appreciation that we're no longer looking for one silver bullet like tourism. We need to do a lot of things to diversify our economy, this thing, rather than just pick a winner. A second thing I'd note is I I think we have a deeper appreciation of the importance of indigenous knowledge, Ike Hawai'i, in how it can help us. And some of that is what we've seen here in the community and at the university. It can be the understanding of watersheds, which the Hawaiians understood as ahupua'a centuries ago, all the way from the mountains down to fish ponds in the ocean. But we also saw it, a great example, I think, was in Australia with the wildfires, where the indigenous people of Australia said, well, of course, you've been mismanaging the land for centuries. This is what happens. And by the way, this is what we used to do for the centuries before the arrival of the colonists there. But it's also indigeneity in culture, in art, and in innovation, and some of the work that's going on, like Purple Maya and other initiatives, including the work that Vassilis is starting with Kamu at the university. I want to give maybe a little bit of a counterpoint to Professor Moretti's statement. I think there is something fundamentally different after this pandemic about people being able to work from anywhere. And it's maybe a little bit harder in biotech, which requires significant physical infrastructure, but that is not the case in the knowledge sector industries, where people can do those jobs from almost anywhere. And I think this is where, when we get quality of life right, we have a huge opportunity to be a place where people want to live to do their jobs. You know, Marc Benioff made this choice years ago and runs a huge enterprise from his home in Kona most of the year. I think we have a great opportunity to bring back Kama'aina. Those are high-paying jobs working for the Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples, that they can do from here, raise their children here, look after their parents here, part of our Hawaii culture. But I think once we get them back here, and by the way, paying taxes here, they also can become part of our high-tech ecosystem that will generate more jobs and ideas and opportunities for many others. I'll just maybe highlight a few more areas and then stop, where I think we have real opportunity. And I think a lot of that opportunity will come from areas where Hawaii has a natural competitive advantage, and where UH either has traditionally had or has committed to build new sets of strengths that can complement Hawaii's competitive advantage. So in the knowledge industry, and Bob referred to that lab in the basement of Keller Hall, a 50-year-old building, which is now the home of literally one of the best visualization labs in the world. And it is exciting our students, it is exciting the community, it's bringing in more federal dollars than we've ever brought into computer science, probably since the Aloha Project, which we just celebrated 50 years ago. And it's even changing the university with collaborations across every discipline. We can't be successful in research without the same kinds of things that Bob talked about in the financial industry. I think we have an understanding that we don't need to rely on state incubators anymore. We have multiple private accelerators and incubators, including our own Accelerate UH program. And these are branching out not just into those fields of computer science and engineering, but food, clothing, retail, ag, and more, along with those traditional business plan competitions and entrepreneurship programs that Carl talked about. In creative media, we are one of the best places in the world to shoot. We've got to do some, we need some infrastructure here. And at UH, we've got an amazing education building coming up at UH West Oahu. And we're now talking with private investors who want to build a private studio. And again, rather than rely on the state film studio, let's bring in private sector folks to bring in their own money, because they see the business opportunity in supporting far more film production, TV production, and modern media production, again, leveraging what we've learned through this pandemic. Green jobs, I think we've got a long way to go, but it's a huge opportunity. You know, kudos to John Leong and Kupu, who built a program analogous to what Rich Racker built with EDH, with some of the CARES funding. But when you look at what we know here about climate change, about sea level rise, about renewable energy, about microgrids, about conservation of the environment, we're as good as anywhere in the world. We have the opportunities to do it here. and to export that expertise in other places. Same in food, agriculture, aquaculture, aquaponics. We have an amazing environment and climate for all of those things. And we've got ag programs across the islands. Tourism, John talked about. I'm using a different word these days. I got to get retrained to talk about regenerative tourism, but I'm thinking about engaged tourism, where we have higher value tourists and tourists who are interested in coming here for more than our beaches, but who want to engage with our culture, our food, our environment, voluntourism, ecotourism, medical tourism, and our expertise in all of those things. So let me just close by saying UH is ready, UH is committed, and we're looking forward to working with everyone in the private sector and in government, including our military partners, to do better, to expand to a more resilient economy than the one that we are growing out of through this pandemic. Mahalo.
Thanks, David. And oh my God, you pretty much answered all the questions. So I don't know if I'm going to ask you to answer any questions anymore. Okay. But one question that everybody's asking, and I think David touched upon, is what does it mean for the state to diversify the economy and why this time is different? So, Bob, do you want to start with that, or?
Sure. And to David's point, we've tried this many times, right? And so what's different this time? I think what's different to the point is there's more infrastructure. I think the other thing too is we look to an innovative economy, there's more at risk. You know, for many of our companies, if we're a small state with a small population and we're entering into a world where scale matters. And if you can't scale with your current customers or other customers that you can attract, that puts you at risk. And so I think that gives a little more oomph to the idea that we need to do it differently this time. And quite frankly, every single company will benefit by knowing their customers better. And the data I was talking about earlier will allow even a coffee shop to a financial services company to do that. The other thing that I think is an opportunity for us is cybersecurity. I didn't touch on that before. For our business, it's all built on trust. You have to have that. If you don't have that, you can't move forward. But all of our businesses need that. And the person who can figure out to democratize cybersecurity for small business is going to be a very wealthy person, because those are the kind of businesses that need a ton of help. You know, Zippy's is on the high end of what I'm talking about for that size business. I'm talking about all those small businesses that need help protect their own information, their customers' information. So those are all the different opportunities that are in front of us. And I think those are some of the things we can do differently this time versus last time.
Anyone wants to jump in there, or otherwise I have a question for the Admiral. Admiral, a question that came for you is, you've talked about the dry dock repairs at Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, but also can you talk a little bit about military vessel repair and submarine and surface, and what are your projections for those budgets? You're muted, Admiral.
Thanks, Vassilis. I guess what I would say is I just see increase in growth potential. The largest submarine base that we have is here. We're going to bring our most capable submarines out. The dry dock is required for the new submarines that we expect to show up in 28. We're working towards a plan to modernize the shipyard to be able to be more effective, more efficient. The surface ship maintenance, we're going to execute and run these ships through the end of their service life. And you know, those ships are in just as good a shape on the day we retire them as the day that we bought them. That's due to the tremendous work from our shipyard workers at Pearl Harbor. So I see growth potential. I don't see any reduction in what has to occur and what we will see out of the ship maintenance portfolio. Thanks.
Thanks, Admiral. Paul, I think the next question probably is for you. And a lot of people are asking, okay, Zippis is, as Bob says, high-end in the IT sector, and they have actually been leader there. What is your advice to other small businesses that they're not at your level at this time of protecting their business?
Great question. And small business or large business, all of us have to be concerned about cyber criminals. And my recommendation is, if you don't have the resources that other companies have, get into peer groups. Also get into joint organizations like Cyber Hawai'i. Cyber Hawai'i can give you connections. They can connect you with people who can give you information. They can educate you on what's happening in the cybersecurity world. They can tell you what's new. So if you are a small business, you don't have the capacity or don't have a large IT department, you can still reach out to peer groups, and you can join associations like Cyber Hawai'i.
Thanks, Paul. John, next one is for you from one of the participants. And the question is, how do you foresee the role of technology and innovation in the tourism industry for years to come?
You know, Vassilis, we see that immediately in the evolution of our reservation systems in particular, as well as our ability to market off of an expanded social media platforms. That's on one end of the spectrum. I would add that in 2018, the keynote speaker at the Global Tourism Summit convened by HTA her name was Sophia, but Sophia was not a woman. Sophia was actually an android that did a live Q&A session with the audience. And at minimum, I knew I was looking at the future manager of a call center. And a number of our larger hotel chains are actually looking at that function in the context of guest services as well. But certainly the advancements in robotics and that field is beginning to impact the outer end of our industry already.
Thanks, John.
And let me add one thing. If there was an innovations prize for this panel, it goes to Paul Yokota and the Portuguese bean soup. Unanimous agreed with all the panelists.
Thank you, John.
Admiral, the next one is for you too, and it has to do with workforce development and your ability to hire in cybersecurity. I just got a question on my phone saying, can you please ask the Admiral how difficult it is to recruit cybersecurity individuals into the military when there is competition from companies like Google, Amazon, and therefore you have the banks, First Hawaiian, and maybe the pay range is not as lucrative, or the stock options are not as lucrative. So do you have any issues there, or do you think you actually recruit the cream of the crop?
I think, Vassilis, what I would say is all of the industries are in strict competition for talent. Cyber security is just one. Information technology, scientists, engineers. So we're all competing. There are some things that the DoD, Navy have to offer that might be different from, say, a Google, Amazon, but it is certainly a challenge. It's a challenge for everyone. And as you know, our pay scales are a bit different. That said, there are certain benefits that some of the other companies, don't offer. So we'll continue to try to recruit the best. We have, I would argue, many of the best, but it is hard work every year for the Navy to ensure we can both recruit and retain those experts in all fields.
Thank you, Admiral.
Vassilis, maybe I can add on to that as well. Excuse me. You know, we're trying to do the same, and we would love to recruit all those folks here in Hawaii and have them, you know, come into the office when that's a thing, or at least be part of our community that we can, you know, rely on them. But honestly, we can't wait. And much like the military with a broader scope, we're looking to bring in resources anywhere in the U.S. and sometimes on an outsourced basis outside the U.S. as necessary to get the job done, because the need to accomplish things doesn't change and the speed increases. And so as much as we can do at UH to prepare people for careers in those areas, the better off we'll be.
Thanks, Bob. So another question that is coming up is, what do you think the state government or the government in general can do to help the economy and the innovation sector in the state of Hawaii?
Maybe I'll start with an example, and this is a touchy question, so I'll be careful. You know, when we were looking to do a bunch of SBA loans earlier this year, average we would do 50 to 60 a year, and in 2 months we did almost 6,000. And we started that with paper, and while we were taking paper, because there's this whole rush to try to do it as quickly as possible, we rethought the process and had our software engineers develop a portal and to do that. And I say that just in the context of, I think all of us, state government as well, and I applaud what David's doing, looking at the various programs within UH. We can't accept the way we've done it and say that's the way we're going to do it going forward. And we really need to stop. And we can't stop what we're doing. We still have to, in state government, serve the people of Hawaii. But we do really need to take some time to rethink how we're serving the people of Hawaii and what they want from state government. And that's a really tough thing to do.
Thanks, Bob. Anybody else wants to jump into this one, or David?
Yeah, maybe I'll just, without jumping into that particular can of worms, because I'm, you know, working through that within UH, and it's not easy in the public sector in particular. I think the job of state government has to be primarily to create an environment in which the 1,000 flowers can bloom and winners can emerge. And I think where we get into challenges is when government tries to pick the winners and makes heavy investments. And when they don't work out, then we're worse off than we were before, because we have even more cynicism than we started with. And I think, you know, it's widely understood, you know, for decades, this is one of the hardest places in the country to do business. So that means a lot of things to different people. And I know the Business Roundtable, among others, has tried to address that, the chamber, but this is a really good time to try to get a handle on that, because we are so disrupted today that I think everybody is ready for even more changes than they would have been last year at this time, when everything seemed to be just fine.
Thanks, David. Another question that is coming is what all of you or some of you are seeing the role of university being in diversifying the economy, or actually going forward in the future. What are your expectations from the university?
I'll take notes on this one. Go ahead, everyone.
I'll take the easy part of it to start, and then maybe turn over to Admiral. We really need lifelong learners. I mean, I talk to so many people in our, as I was talking about, in our data and our data scientists and a number of others. We hired a number of people several years ago to help us do modeling, and they were out of the School of Ocean Technology, you know, ocean engineering. And you go, how does ocean engineering go to financial modeling? Well, a lot of that is modeling. And I think that willingness to just encourage people to learn and then see how we can apply it kind of as you go is important, and not to stop the day you graduate with whatever degree you get. And I think bringing people back is super important.
If I might add, our business is looking for partners, and if the University of Hawaii does a great job in getting people prepared to be partners. So whether it's in business or agriculture, we buy as much local products as we can, whether it be beef or produce or tofu, you name it, or eggs. So we need talent, and we need skill sets coming out of the university to help us in agriculture as well. And of course, IT, I heard so much about that. We constantly need partners to help us look at solutions and help us think through this. We're getting overwhelmed, and we need people who are smart and objective and are going to help us through the process.
But Vassilis, I might add that David did a wonderful job in addressing the subsets in the market, like agritourism and science tourism. And if I were just to focus on, let's say, the island of Hawaii, where the University of Hawaii has a campus in Hilo and one at Palama Nui, clearly you have an island there that has every microclimate on the planet, with the exception of polar tundra and Sahara. You have an active volcano with its origins to the center of the planet. You have the preeminent astronomical center for Earth-based astronomy on Mauna Kea. The world takes its baseline carbon measurements from Mauna Loa. So what we have here, when I integrate all of that in the knowledge that the University of Hawaii has embedded in the institution and its people, clearly what we're looking at is the equivalent of Davos of the Pacific, what Davos is to the World Economic Forum. The island of Hawaii, the Kohala Coast in particular, will become the World Sustainability Forum center, where the brightest minds in the world and the change makers and thought leaders will gather annually to convene. The University of Hawaii will have to be a backbone organization in that initiative.
And David, for your notes, we certainly want to make sure we keep the tremendous relationship between Navy, DoD, and the University of Hawaii. We have benefited tremendously from the many bright individuals that you've been able to generate. We see growth work as industries change. We talked about data science. I think that's a growth area. And then the innovation of shifting from the current some industries into others that may emerge, all those will be applicable in DoD. So whether it be R&D, whether it be environmental, whether it be IT, whether it be cyber, whether it be engineerings and scientists, again, we see this relationship, number one, is foundational to the work we have to do here, and we look to continue and expand it. Thanks.
Thanks, Admiral. There are many more questions, but we're down to 5 minutes, and I wanted to see if you would like each one of you take a minute for some closing thoughts before we actually listen from one of the original instigators of the innovation economy. That would be Rich Wacker. So, Bob, do you want to start?
I just think I was head of the roundtable when Rich started on that journey, and it's just been fantastic to see what we've been able to accomplish in those years. And credit to Alan Ueda, who was my predecessor on the head of the roundtable, that really kind of got us kicked off with some early work. But this is the kind of partnership, as I think Paul mentioned, that we need to continue, and Admiral mentioned that it's only us. And if we start to think that someone else is going to come help us and someone else is going to solve our problems, think again, because everybody's got their own issues. So I know Hawaii has been built on a way of working together and finding ways to work together that is a special place. That's what I've been here 35 years. And I don't want to live anywhere else. And I really, like many of us on this call, want to try to find ways to support through the university, the broader community, and find a way to make Hawaii better and for everybody, not just the people that do go to college and beyond, but we really need to, I can't remember who said it, I think it was our previous speaker, the economist, that said, you know, you bring everybody up by growing a good university. And I think that's one of the things that has been foundational for me. When I was a master's student in Keller Hall, I never would have thought there'd be a visualization lab in the basement 25 years ago or 30 years ago. And it's fantastic. I just think that's the things that we can be best of class of anything. Hey, we just had a Nobel Prize winner that went to the Viking from Hilo High. I mean, there's nothing that people in Hawaii can't accomplish. So I would just want to put that out there that if we aim high, we'll accomplish a lot. But thank you.
Thanks, Bob. John, any closing remarks?
Yes, you know, throughout my adult life, professional career, tourism has always been positioned as the antithesis of a diversified economy. And I think it behooves us as an industry to begin to see ourselves as really a driver to economic diversity. We have examples of that, especially in the culinary arts, where 20, 25 years ago, a group of chefs, notwithstanding the one that Bob Harrison is going to tee up with shortly, you know, on Maui, got together and gave definition to what became Pacific Rim cuisine and farm to table activity. And the industry, tourism industry, helped to drive that change and in effect help our local farmers, local fishermen. And we just need to take a better look at that in the next 5 to 8 years of how we bring more of the supply chain that is needed within the industry back to our state, back to specific islands, back to specific districts, and begin to use tourism as a driver for that diversification. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Admiral?
Thanks, Vassilis. You know, I'll finish with where I started, which is the partnership is tremendous. It has room for expansion. As the team here discussed diversification, we think we're a part of that solution. And we look forward to working with everyone who has an interest. And I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support to the Navy here on Hawaii. Thank you, Vassilis.
Thanks, Admiral. Paul?
Thanks, Vassilis. Something very, very short. I think a personal thing I have is let's be bamboo. So we think our company is bamboo. Bamboo can be tough, flexible, and resilient, but bamboo never stands alone. So, you know, from this panel, from everything I've heard of this conference, we all need partners. We all need people to stand with us. We all need to be bamboo together.
Thanks, Paul. And David, closing thoughts today?
Yeah, thank you. And I was almost exactly where Paul is. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't close by reminding everyone that the University of Hawaii is the institution, it's the single institution most important to our future. The state can't survive and thrive without a strong university, and we're fortunate to have an integrated system that can look after all the aspects of post-secondary needs. But as Paul said, we can't do it alone. We need our parts working together. That's my job, but we need our parts also working with all of you and everyone in the community. I think we're incredibly fortunate that people in Hawaii understand and leaders in Hawaii understand that we have to do this together, that it's not something where we're competing to make my business successful at the expense of yours. And I just feel so fortunate to be able to engage in this really important work with all of you and our 168 participants as well. So mahalo.
Thanks, everybody. And with that, I would like to thank our panelists. I hope next year we'll do it in person. And thank you. And thank you for your time. And thanks for everybody. Thank you.
Aloha.